Don't miss the biggest hype of the year. While everyone else is still in winter hibernation, I'm showing you the absolute must-have models for the spring season. And today, we're diving into the second biggest demand in the entire 3D printing market, high-quality decoration. Whether it's for your own living room or your Etsy shop, you'll get my models including a lifetime commercial license. Let's jump right in. For this video, the company Prusa provided me with the Core One 3D printer as well as the filament. However, today I'm only using PETG and we're focusing more on the products and the print quality rather than what the printer can or cannot do. Over the past 10 years, I've used a large number of 3D printers, many of which are no longer available on the European market. That's why I'm curious which brand you're using and whether you plan to stick with it. I'm now loading the first sliced file into the printer and starting the print directly from the USB stick. The first layer is the most important one, and here everything immediately looked great. With a new 3D printer, it's always a relief when the calibration works without any issues. For the first models, the support structure is crucial because it requires more time and material. Of course, I'm also showing my material costs today, so you can estimate what production costs you might expect. And if you decide to sell your 3D prints, which I highly recommend since the profit margins in the 3D printing world are extremely high, it can be a great way to earn money on the side or even full-time. The work is clean, and even with little experience you can get very good results since modern printers handle most of the process reliably. The first print is now finished, and once the build plate has cooled down, PETG is often much harder to remove than PLA. If you run into problems, you can simply warm up the bed slightly again. Now let's talk about the support structure. Since I produce many different models, I often read comments from people who struggle to remove either the supports or the brim. In the slicer, you can adjust absolutely everything, such as increasing the Z distance for supports or spacing the brim further away from the model. However, with a good 3D printer and reasonable print speeds, supports usually come off easily. Filament quality also plays a major role. I was very satisfied here. The first layer printed cleanly and the supports came off without any issues. The small groove has a dimension of 3.3 mm, so it was important to me that the measurement stayed exact. Next, I moved on to the laser cutter where I cut 3 mm acrylic glass. These are my test models, by the way. Since they're not very complex, I filmed the test print directly. The protective films are removed on both sides and then the acrylic plate is inserted into the 3D print. Because the tolerances are quite tight, you shouldn't press the acrylic in with too much force. The first model is designed to be mounted on the wall. Take a look. The acrylic fits really nicely. It looks great, but that's not all. And why am I now cutting a larger piece? I want to show you how much of a difference just a few extra centimeters can make in your final print. Here's the new model. The orange one has a diameter of 21 centimeters, because the Core One's build plate is only 22 by 25 centimeters. I intentionally modeled it 1 centimeter smaller. The black model, however, has a diameter of 29 centimeters, only about 8 centimeters larger, but the difference already looks quite significant. You can get both models, by the way. The larger one can be printed with something like a Prusa Core One L, which offers a 30 by 30 centimeter build plate, or any similarly sized printer. I created these two models to show you the types of decoration you can offer. I'm using black aquarium gravel and filling the model about halfway. You can also use soil and add real plants such as succulents or cacti. That's the reason I printed this in PETG. It's more resistant to moisture. For dry decorative materials like you see here, PLA works perfectly fine as well. I had to wash and dry the white decorative stones before placing them inside. After washing and drying the stones, I add a layer of decorative stones on top. As mentioned, this is only an example of what it could look like. Everyone has different taste. You could also use soil and add the plants I mentioned earlier. In that case, however, I wouldn't recommend the acrylic plate version since visible soil usually doesn't look very appealing. More on that in a moment. Now let's talk about the moss look stones. It's incredible how much the prices on Etsy increase for certain items as soon as preserved moss is included with the objects. And yes, it can look really beautiful. I chose the moss stones here, and this is what the result could look like. I think having several of these in different colors on the wall would look really pretty and modern. Maybe even other decoration variations or different sizes. What do you think? And yes, you're absolutely right, you have a 3D printer but not a laser to cut acrylic sheets. I designed something for that as well. All in the same size, once in 21 centimeters and once in 29 centimeters. You can also scale these up or down a bit since the measurements don't need to be millimeter precise like with the acrylic glass models. By the way, this time I rotated the model slightly in Prusa Slicer so I could print it standing up instead of flat. This way, the walls look much nicer in the final print. The print took a bit longer this time and I was really curious to see how it would turn out with the support structure. Yes, this model is designed to be mounted on the wall. And of course that can be a bit limiting since not everyone wants to drill 2 holes into their wall. This is what the finished part looks like without the acrylic glass. The surface shows clearly visible VFA, vertical fine artifacts. I've never seen it this pronounced before, but I've already seen videos of the Prusa Core One where the same thing occurs. There can be several reasons for this, but the most likely are either the belts are too coarse, so the small steps here are too pronounced, or the stepper motors are transmitting vibrations to the print. In the slicer there are presets for speed, balanced and structural. With structural, the surface quality suffers in favor of stability. I, however, printed in speed mode, which Prusa says provides very good surface quality but only average durability. The print did finish successfully, but I wouldn't put it up for sale online in this quality if I'm not satisfied with it myself. That's why for the next model I decided to create a version that can simply stand on a table or sideboard as a decorative piece. The printer from Prusa is producing my second model in the same decorative niche. This model also requires support structures and it uses almost the entire build plate minus 1 centimeter. So the total print size is 24 by 21 centimeters. I also made a larger version, which we'll see in a moment. PETG is a bit harder to remove from the build plate compared to PLA, but it's still one of the easier filaments to work with. I often see people on Etsy selling items that really shouldn't be printed in PLA at all, like aquarium decorations or anything that gets near moisture. If I still have residue left on the build plate, I heat it up to around 80 degrees Celsius. With a scraper, the leftover material comes off easily without scratching the plate. Any scratch you make will show up on future prints, so handle it carefully. This model also needed a lot of support structures, but as you can see they come off very cleanly, and that's with standard Prusa slicer settings. One more thing, I had some white marks on the areas that were directly on the build plate. Since these spots are visible on the finished decor piece, they need to be removed. I use a jet lighter for that. On white filament you normally don't see these marks, and if you do, no worries. This method fixes it easily. Just make sure to pass over the area very briefly, otherwise the filament overheats and warps. This model is meant to be used as a table decoration or placed on a sideboard. That's why I'm adding acrylic plates to both sides. And yes, I also made versions without acrylic plates. I'll show those in a moment. And of course there's also a much larger model that cannot be printed on the regular Core One. For that, you'd need something like the Core 1L. I printed the larger models with my bamboo. For the decoration I'm doing the exact same setup as before to show what it could look like. Black aquarium gravel, then white decorative stones, and finally my moss stones on top. Although I think the black layer is a bit too high, maybe I should have added a few white stones at the bottom as well. And remember, you don't have to sell these pieces pre-decorated. You can simply offer them as empty containers and let customers fill them however they like. The last decorative box. Just one more time to show you what it looks like without acrylic glass on the front. What do you think? Is this the right angle to print a box like this, or should I have laid it flat? And this is how it looks. No acrylic glass needed and no laser cutting machine, just a 3D printer. New project. You're going to like this one because it's all about spring. In the last 3D printing video we already talked about listing products in time. The tray and the Gridfinity insert consist of 2 parts that fit perfectly together. Important, print it in PETG with at least 3 walls everywhere it comes into contact with water. It's also best to print a bit hotter so the filament layers fuse together properly. I printed the orange parts on my other 3D printer so I could finish everything in time to publish this video for the weekend. These are small seed starting pots. This is how they're printed, and they can be folded afterward. In total there are 25 small pots, and the best part is, when you transplant the small plant later, you won't damage the roots because the soil can be removed very easily. Don't worry about it, wood. If you use good filament, the pots can easily be folded over 100 times. Just make sure to print with a 0.2 mm layer height and keep all layers consistent. Now let's talk about the walls. They were designed for 3 mm acrylic sheets and fit in with a bit of pressure. I struggled a bit with how to model the top plate and eventually decided to let the acrylic sheets slide in from one side. Easy to model and simple to assemble. In the video, you can see that it fits a little too tight. That's why I made it 2 mm narrower later for your download. What I mean is, on the back side where the acrylic sheet slides in, it's still visible. The top two orange parts are simply plugged into each other on my build. You can glue them for extra strength if you want. But there are also handles, and if you always lift the cover using the handles to water the plants, it works perfectly fine without glue. Next month, the growing season for most varieties begins. Maybe you can still list your products in time and benefit from spring and summer. By downloading the files, you're supporting my work. I've also linked the Prusa Core 3D printer shown in the video. It's a large 3D printer with a relatively small print area. You might want to check out the Core 1L instead. Expensive, but maybe exactly your style. Bye!